I don't stay in hotels anymore. A year ago, I decided to go on a trip for the weekend. Work was particularly heavy, and my free time was pretty much non-existent, so I figured I should take a few days off, away from the incessant emails and messages from the office. I'm not exactly high demand when it comes to vacations, and usually all I need is a little bit of time away from technology, combined with a nice hiking trail. So I chose a town on top of the mountains south of where I live, since I figured 2 days there would be enough to refresh me. The drive over there was long and tedious, but with occasional nice views here and there. It took me about 4 hours to get to the mountain itself, and despite it being pitch black on the road, I could tell I was there due to the air becoming progressively colder. I wasn't even sure if I was in the right place until I turned on my GPS. At first, my route was marked as 2 hours away, but then suddenly changed to 30 minutes away from the hotel I booked. Confused, because I was sure that it would take me at least 2 more hours to reach the destination, I just figured I miscalculated and the GPS found a quicker route. Hell, even when I reached the town, I wasn't sure if I was in the right place, since the lights were mostly out and I could only see as far as my headlights illuminated in front of me. I didn't stop until the "You've arrived at your destination" notification sounded from the GPS, and I saw that I was in front of an average-looking building. I looked at my GPS, but it showed as no landmarks around whatsoever, no hotel name, no streets, nothing. I chalked it up to bad signal and took another look at the building in front. I could tell it sort of looked like the hotel I booked, but I contemplated the fact that it looked nothing like in the pictures I saw. Too tired from the drive to care, I parked my car, grabbed my things, and went inside. The interior seemed pleasant enough, albeit a bit claustrophobic due to the narrow corridors. "Hi," I smiled to the lady at the reception. "I have a reservation." "Yes, you're on the list. Welcome. Please sign here and I will show you to your room." The lady went from a "I'm dying of boredom" state to perky. I signed the papers and was escorted to my room on the 4th floor. The room itself looked quite luxurious, contrasting the exterior of the hotel. "If you need anything, there's always someone at the reception." The clerk smiled again and left. I looked outside the window, trying to take in the view, but it was pointless. Everything surrounding the outside of the hotel was pitch black. Not giving it a second thought, I slumped down on the bed and decided to sleep, not even setting an alarm for the first time in years. I was determined to sleep until my back started to hurt. At some point during the night, I could hear some sounds coming from outside my room. It sounded like footsteps and giggling. I unlocked my cell phone and squinted, seeing it was 4:30 a.m. What the hell were kids doing playing at this hour? Disregarding it, I went back to sleep. Just as I started to doze off, I was startled awake by a loud bang outside my room. I opened my eyes, wide awake, staring through the darkness at the coat hanger in front of the door, which I could barely make out. I held my breath, trying to hear any more sounds, half lazy and half scared to get up and check out what that bang was. I heard a muffled giggle again, starting to get annoyed at this point. Still, I continued staring at the coat hanger, ready to get up and tell the kids off if they continued. About 2 minutes passed and nothing happened. I sighed in relief and closed my eyes again. But for some reason I had this nagging feeling that I couldn't let go. I felt tense, unnerved even. I opened my eyes again and looked towards the coat hanger. Nothing. Just my imagination. And it was then that I remembered something that sent cold shivers down my spine. There was no coat hanger when I arrived. I moved my gaze to my left very slowly and saw that my jacket was on the chair. I frantically looked back at the coat hanger, heart thumping in my chest. That was no hanger. It was a fucking person. What I mistook as the top of the hanger was actually a face, a wide-eyed, grinning, toothy face, and it was staring right at me. I didn't dare to move. I was so petrified with fear that I could only hear the deafeningly loud and fast beat of my heart. And then I heard that giggle again, muffled, sounding almost like it wasn't even coming from the room, but it unmistakably came from that creature's mouth. I just laid there as that thing started moving across the room toward the window on my left. I could see its full form now. The head was round and maintained that blood-freezing grin the entire time, and it stood unnaturally on a very thin and long body. The creature itself was in fact so tall that it bent its knees and hunched its bony back forward when walking, making every step ever so slowly, letting its pale arms hang on the sides. After what seemed like an eternity, it reached the window and stopped there, staring outside and letting out another giggle. I could see its reflection in the window, which seemed to be frozen in place. Still grinning, still wide-eyed, just standing, staring in one spot. I knew I had to get out. It was now or never. I slowly, very slowly started getting ready to jump out of bed, not taking my eyes off the creature for 1 second. I held my breath, moving my legs towards the edge and preparing to boost myself with my hands. And then the creature let out another muffled giggle, which froze me in my place. This one was different. It was longer, deeper, more guttural, and as the creature was giggling, it slowly moved its head slightly to the left with an unnatural creaking sound, moving its gaze along with it. The reflection in the window stopped its movement the moment its gaze turned directly to me, and as it did, the giggling suddenly stopped as well. It was just dead silence, and my gaze meeting this thing's, neither of us blinking. It was all I could take. My survival instincts kicked in and I burst out of the room hearing that creature giggling more maliciously now, almost like a hyena. As I ran through the hotel, I couldn't help but notice that the entire interior was now old, decayed and covered in dust. There were no lights anywhere. It's as if I was in a completely different building. I didn't stop when I was out of that fucked up place. I didn't stop when I reached my car. I didn't stop until morning when the adrenaline finally subsided. On my way back, my GPS was going haywire, so I stopped at a gas station to ask for directions. What the employee there told me shook me to the core. When I told him that I came from that town and was looking for a way home, he shook his head and told me that I must be mistaken, since the town which was intended to be my original destination for vacation was at least 3 more hours away from where I stayed the night. He said that there had been a small hotel there before, but it closed down due to unknown reasons around 20 years ago and had been abandoned ever since. I never fully understood what happened that night, and I haven't been able to make myself look it up. When my friends and co-workers talk about having a vacation in that same town, I just pretend I don't know the place well since it was a long time ago, even though they can tell something is wrong. That was over 1 year ago, and I haven't taken any vacations since then, save for days off when I just stay home. I can't sleep without the lights on anymore, and sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up with a rapid heart rate to that same muffled giggle. I just had the worst vacation. It's been a horrible summer so far. Work has been really stressful, and then my boyfriend dumped me for one of my friends, so I've spent most of the summer watching Netflix alone in my shitty apartment. It's been pretty depressing. I honestly thought a beach trip would make it better, but it didn't. It only made things worse. Everything started off great. I spent the first few days of my trip lounging on a beach and getting drunk on cheap booze from the hotel bar. That's where I met Mia. She was another solo traveler staying at my resort. We bonded instantly, and I was thrilled to have a friend. I was having fun by myself, but it was nice to not be alone all the time. I thought maybe my new friend and I could do something together. I was feeling restless. I can only sit on a beach for so long. Hey, would you want to go on a hike? Maybe see some ruins? What about kayaking? They said at the front desk there's a local shop that rents them out. We could kayak to that island. She pointed out into the horizon at a speck of green. That sounded fun. I agreed, and that afternoon we walked down to the rental shop. The interior was dim, and a ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. The man behind the counter had long dreads and wore an unbuttoned Hawaiian shirt. He smiled as we approached the counter. We rented 2 boats for the following morning. He pulled out a large map and showed us where to pick up the boats and gave us some basic info on how to get to the island, which was just visible on the horizon through the dingy store window. The clerk raved about the wildlife and white sands on the uninhabited island. "What's that?" Mia interrupted, pressing her finger down on the map. I glanced over to see her indicate another speck of land, beyond the one we were headed to. "It's a barrier island, but you can't go out there. It's a protected area. You'll get fined." Mia nodded and asked no more about it. We paid and wrapped up our conversation. The next morning, Mia and I met at dawn. We were quiet as we set off in our kayaks, sleepy and excited. The water shimmered in the morning sunlight. The temperature was already high. I dreaded how hot it would be that afternoon. We paddled over calm waters for nearly half an hour, the island looming closer and closer. When we finally landed on the white sandy beach, I was thrilled to explore. The kayak guy had said there was a short trail that would take you to a waterfall. He certainly hadn't lied about how beautiful it was. Tropical birds screamed in the trees, and the schools of fish sped through clear water. I peered into the lush foliage, eager to start the trail. We followed the path at a leisurely pace. It was a relief to be in the shade, even that early in the day. When the trail finally ended at a thin waterfall, we both took a dip in the cool water below. I couldn't believe how magical it all was. Back on the beach, we snacked on food packed from the hotel. I was pleased with our trip. The early morning paddle had certainly been worth it. When I suggested we load up and head back, though, Mia shook her head. "I think we should go further, to the other island." I stared at her. "It's protected, you heard him. We'll get fined." She laughed. "Oh, come on, they'll never know we were there. A couple of girls in kayaks are the least of their worries." "And besides," she continued, chewing her sandwich, "you were blown away by this place. This ? This is nothing. Just imagine how much more pristine and beautiful a protected island will be." I didn't want to go, but I had to agree with her. This place was super cool, but I was curious about what wildlife could be on the other island. And sure, there had been evidence of humans here, trash and fire pits. Hesitantly, I agreed. Mia jumped for joy. "This is going to be so fun," she yelled. "We have to be back by sundown. I'm not staying out there long," I said sternly. The last thing I wanted was any legal trouble in a foreign country, no matter how small. "Of course," she replied, eyes sparkling. Her enthusiasm was infectious. We headed for the boats and launched them out into calm waters. I regretted the decision almost instantly. The midday sun was harsh and blinding, and I started sweating like crazy. The life jacket only made it worse. By the time we approached the new island, I knew I was getting overheated. We had only brought so much water, and I'd nearly drunk all of mine. Mia had been right, though. It was beautiful. The natural beach was full of driftwood and large shells. Crabs scuttled along the sand, and birds wheeled overhead. Lizards sunned on nearby rocks. This island was even more perfect than the first. "So cool," Mia yelled, as we pushed our kayaks up on the sand. "And it's all to ourselves." We aimlessly wandered along the beach. I had no intention of going into the bush. It looked dense and unpleasant, and I didn't want to get lost. I squatted by a tide pool for a few minutes, looking at all the shells. "Hey Mia, come look at this." I raised my head up and scanned the beach. Mia was gone. I waited, thinking she would reappear any minute, but she didn't. Uncertain as to what to do, I found shade under some palm trees and kept close to the boats. I began to panic. I was on a protected island illegally, with a girl I barely knew, and no one knew we were here. What was I thinking? I waited, and I waited some more. I drank all the water. And I began to get really, really anxious. This island had been a mistake. Finally, as the sun began to drop toward the horizon, I decided to build a fire. Bugs had been eating me alive, and I thought the smoke might repel them. I piled up dry twigs and leaves and lit them with a cigarette lighter from my pack. I blew on the embers, and the flames climbed the dry kindling. I sat back, pleased with myself, and looked up to see Mia standing directly over me. "Where the hell have you been?" I yelled, startled. "I've been waiting for you for hours." She stared at me blankly and didn't reply. I frowned as she sat in the sand across from me. Something was wrong. Mia was pale, and cold sweat drenched her face. She didn't seem to recognize me. "Mia, are you okay?" Mia was a shell of her former talkative self. Irritation turned to concern and then fear. My stomach knotted with anxiety. Something was definitely wrong. Was she sick? But how could she get sick this quickly? She didn't speak at all the rest of the evening. I stayed with her. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in an emergency situation like that. Finally, as her condition deteriorated, I remembered my cell phone, lost in the bottom of my bag. I left her by the fire and went down to the water, where I tried to get service with my dwindling battery. Does 911 even work outside the US? I wondered stupidly. Who did I even call? I tried in vain to call the hotel, but there was no signal. Defeated, I walked back to the fire. I went over to Mia, who stared vacantly ahead. "Look, Mia, we're going to have to go back. Do you think you can paddle?" I asked her. She didn't answer. And she didn't move. A horrible creeping sensation swept over me. No way. As much as I wanted to run far, far away from this dumb beach, I had to be sure. I reached my hand towards her. Flames danced in her glassy eyes, and I felt horrified as her lack of pulse confirmed what I had suspected. Mia was dead. "Oh God," I whispered to myself. How did this happen? I cursed myself for getting into this situation. I glanced around for my things. I had to get out of there. As I shouldered my backpack, I glanced back at Mia. She stonily faced the fire, looking straight ahead. I should close her eyes, I thought, although the idea revolted me. I reached out towards her face and heard her stomach gurgle. I stopped. What the hell? And then, to my utter horror, a flood of newly hatched spiders erupted from her lips and cascaded down onto her body. I screamed. They kept coming, hundreds, thousands of them, crawling down her body and out onto the sand, towards me. I ran faster than I ever have to the kayak. It was long past sunset, and I paddled out into darkness, only guided by the light of the mainland. Adrenaline pumped through my veins. My arms shook as I sliced the water with a strength I didn't know I had. It took me a long time to reach the shore. I was so overwhelmed with fear, I have no idea how long I was out there, only that I held it together enough to get my boat back to the rental dock. I checked out the next morning and rearranged my flight to come home early. I didn't tell anyone what happened. She was basically a stranger to me, and I don't want to be connected to her death in any way. But I know I will be. Every day I just wait for the call. I'm worried they'll link me to the missing kayak, abandoned on a protected island with a dead body on the beach. I went on a vacation in the woods with my friends. It was a mistake. Carl slammed the door open and rushed outside, taking deep breaths before I could turn off the car. "Geez, Carl, is there anything that doesn't make you sick?" "So shut up, Tom. I told you I would get car sickness." "Maybe you should have eaten less for lunch." "Come on, Tom. Those switchbacks weren't easy to deal with. If I hadn't been driving, I would feel dizzy as well." I took off my seatbelt and got out of the driver's seat. "You guys sure you don't want to go back and spend the holidays at home? We are in the wild here, light years away from civilization," said Tom with a smug expression as he got out of the car. "Sure, Tom. I bet our Stone Age ancestors lived in a cabin just like the one we rented." Carl opened the trunk and tossed Tom his backpack. All right, but you get what I mean. We're lucky if we got running water inside." Tom was checking his phone. "I barely have any reception." Carl grabbed his bag and closed the trunk. "It's not off-grid. Don't be silly. The keys should be under the doormat. Can you check, Ethan?" His face was still pale from the car sickness. The mountain air filled our nostrils as the forest extended far beyond our eyes could see. A cozy-looking cabin sat in a clearing, where the dirt road ended. We initially opted for a camping trip for our sophomore spring break, but our parents, especially Carl's, were very worried about the possible dangers, so we settled for a cabin instead. I flipped the doormat and found a bear paw keyring from underneath. There is no spare. I'll keep them if you guys don't mind. Good idea. We can agree Tom isn't reliable, Carl said with a mocking smile. Tom rolled his eyes. As I opened the door, he rushed inside and went for the kitchen. The cabin had 2 floors, a living room and the kitchen downstairs, and a bedroom and bathroom upstairs. Holy shit, the fridge is stacked, echoed Tom from the kitchen. There is even a pack of beers. We joined Tom in the kitchen as he was examining the fridge. Shouldn't the owner be aware that we're underage? A hissing sound followed as Tom cracked open a cold one. Who cares, Ethan? It's just a few beers. He took a long sip and handed the can to Carl, who reluctantly also took a sip. I sighed and waited for Carl to take a sip myself. Let's unpack our bags upstairs, then let's see what to eat for dinner. The following night wasn't particularly eventful. We watched one of the Blu-ray movies we found, then stayed up late on the porch, chatting and drinking. Right before waking up, I dreamed of Carl calling my name, but as I opened my eyes, the only noise to greet me was the bedroom window being slammed repeatedly by the wind. I realized I was still wearing the same clothes as when we arrived. No one else was in the bedroom. I closed the window as the wind's howling echoed outside, and after a quick bathroom trip, I made my way downstairs. Good morning, Ethan. What the fuck was that noise? Tom was lying on the couch. He didn't look like he had been awake for long either. There is a strong wind raging outside. It was slamming the bedroom window. No, I mean earlier. Didn't you hear some kind of howling? He made his way to the kitchen. I shook my head. No, must have been the wind. Whatever. Tom filled the glass with water. Just wake up Carl and tell him to come down for breakfast. I gave him a puzzled look. Wait, what? I thought Carl was here already. Tom froze, staring at the water in his glass. He's not here. Where the hell could he have been gone? His jacket and backpack are still there. I stepped outside on the porch. There was no sign of Carl outside, and our car was still parked. He's not outside either. I'll call him. A noise resonated from the kitchen. I went over the counter and examined the source of the ringtone. It's his phone. Do you remember the last time you saw him? Moments of silence followed as we tried to think about the events of last night. We watched that movie, then stayed on the porch until, 2 a.m. Then we went to bed. I don't remember seeing Carl leaving. Yeah, me neither. By the way, why were you sleeping on the couch? Because you and Carl were snoring like crazy at some point, but I would have noticed if he ran outside in the middle of the night. Chances are he sleepwalked outside and got lost. We better go look for him. Tom nodded. Yeah, he can't have gone too far. We started looking for Carl in the nearby woods. Around 10 minutes later, Tom grabbed my arm. Look, under that tree? A flash of blue caught my sight as I strained my eyes. That must be him. Next to a large old tree, someone was slumped next to the trunk. I recognized the blue sweater Carl was wearing. Carl, are you all right? He was lying curled up on the ground, cowering his face as if he were trying to hide in the burrow at the base of the tree. Carl didn't seem to acknowledge our presence. Carl, it's us. Are you okay? I grabbed his shoulder and shook him, causing him to lower his hands. His face was marked with signs of tears, and his eyes were filled with terror. Carl pushed himself up against the trunk. Ethan! Where is he? He was panting heavily. His clothes were dirty with mud and foliage, but there weren't any signs of blood or injuries. It's just me and Tom, Carl. Are you hurt? No, you don't understand. He was there. You have to go away. Carl, you're nothing making any sense. Who is there? Did someone attack you? He looked around, his eyes scouting the surroundings to search for something. No. He called me last night and I had to follow him. Who are you talking about? The man with the skull. He lives nearby. I gave Tom a puzzled look. He was just as creeped out as I was. You don't seem injured. Let's go back to the cabin first, then you'll tell us everything. A noise like a distorted, low-pitched howling could be heard in the distance. Carl screamed, closing his eyes. It's him! Run away! Don't look into his eyes! Calm down, Carl. It's just a moose. We're in a forest, remember? Ethan, help me get him back up. We helped Carl stand up. His legs were still trembling. Come on, Carl. We are not far from the cabin. I put Carl's arm around his neck and helped him walk. We made our way back to the cabin with Carl occasionally stuttering nonsense and frantically looking over his shoulder. We made him lay on the bed and gave him some water. Carl, can we talk now? Do you remember what happened? Carl took a sip of water and cleared his throat. Last night, he called my name while I was sleeping. Who? Did you see his face? Tom was looking outside the bedroom window. Carl shook his head. He wears a horned animal skull. A moose, I think. He told me to follow him or he would take you two instead. And you went outside to follow him? I'm sorry, guys. His voice is very convincing. I don't think he's a person like us. He made me look into his eyes. Those weren't human eyes. That was when I ran away. I can't forget those eyes anymore. Are you really sure that didn't happen in a nightmare? Yes, I wasn't dreaming. He slammed his fist on the nightstand, spilling some of the water into the glass. We have to leave before he comes back. Carl, maybe you should first get some rest upstairs. You look really tired. We can talk again later. We can't wait here anymore. We have to go now. Carl, we can't just... The noise could be heard again. This time it sounded more like a bark than a howling, and it was much closer. He's here, we don't have time. Carl, it's just an animal, calm down. Right, Tom? Tom was looking out the window. As he turned around, his face had become pale. Ethan, what the fuck is that? He pointed at a distant tree. I went to the window and looked closely. A moose skull could be seen next to a tree in the distance. After squinting, I could see the skull belonged to what seemed an absurdly tall human figure. Me and Tom looked at each other without speaking a word. The realization of what we believed was just a nightmare crept up on us, and my heart started pounding. I was sweating. Ethan, maybe Carl is right. We have to go. I'll get the backpacks. I told you, there is no time. Carl had gotten up from the bed. Ethan, get the keys. I didn't even have time to process what happened before I heard the noise again, coming from downstairs. I froze as heavy footsteps resonated from the ground floor. What the fuck? Tom brandished the lamp from the nightstand. We moved as far back as we could from the stairs as the footsteps grew closer. Don't look into his eyes. I turned my attention to Carl, who tried to hide under the bed. Then I heard Tom scream and the sound of the lamp dropping on the floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something else was in the room. As I turned around, an inhumanely tall figure was standing in front of me. It was wearing a moose skull, but I couldn't see its face, let alone the eyes, and the rest of its body was draped in a black fur coat. The eye holes in the skull were nothing but pitch black as it stared at me, motionless, hunched forward to not touching the ceiling. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. I tried to move, but every muscle in my body was frozen. Then my vision faded, and I passed out a few seconds later. I was lying on the bedroom floor when I regained my senses. Tom, what happened? He was standing there like frozen in place. There was no one else in the bedroom. I put a hand on his shoulder. Tom? Where is Carl? He had a blank expression on his face and was staring at the wall like hypnotized. Tom, wake up. I shook him violently. Where is Kate? He grabbed my hand without looking at me, with no change in his expression. We'll be going. He is with us. You can leave now. His voice was a whisper. Tom, what the fuck are you? I suddenly got pushed to the wall, hurting my head in the process. As I reopened my eyes, I was alone. I bolted downstairs, but he was gone. I checked outside while calling 911, but nobody was there either. The police told me to come to the station as they couldn't send anyone up there for a while. Carl and Tom were filed as missing persons. I went home as they opened an investigation, but no traces have been found so far, after 1 month. What's crazy is that the police told us not to expect much since many people go missing while camping in this area. The local media barely talked about us and dismissed it as drunk teenagers getting lost in the woods. I had issues sleeping at night after what happened. I often expect to wake up and see that skull staring at me. I thought they were just nightmares, until this morning. I was still half asleep when I heard Tom and Carl calling my name. I woke up, but I was alone, and the windows in my room were open. I was sure I closed them last night. I saw something in the fog in the early morning on the last day of family vacation. Nobody would believe what hunted us. I awoke early in the morning. I believe it was between the hours of 5 and 6. My wife wanted us to get a head start and leave the cabin before the weekend traffic. I can never sleep when I have a stressful itinerary, so I walked downstairs to use the bathroom and get ready for the day. As I tiptoed down the hallway, I peeked into my kids' room to find that they were still sleeping. The stairway leading to the ground floor was too dim to see in, barely illuminated by the still rising sun. I held onto the handrail, trying not to slip on the steep set of stairs. The bathroom was adjacent to the sunroom. The sunroom was my favorite room because it could view the valley under the mountain through a large glass window. I stopped for a moment to admire the beauty of an early morning. The valley glowed a dark gray as the fog rose up from the ground. The mist was so dense that I could barely see 20 feet in front of the cabin. I smiled before entering the bathroom. When I was finished, I looked out in the field again to see that the fog had thinned and decent visibility had returned. I began ascent upstairs when I had to do a double take, for I was unsure what I saw. In the distance, I viewed a tall black shape that resembled a stick figure. It was hunched over with all 4 of its limbs to the ground, like a dog getting ready to pounce. The figure must have been 10 feet tall, with disproportionate legs far longer than any human. It didn't look like a solid creature, but it instead looked as if a shadow had taken corporeal form. "What the hell?" I said. I approached the window when, to my great horror, the creature took a step. I squinted my eyes, trying to discern whether I mistook an oddly shaped tree. I fell back into the nearest chair and tried to catch my breath. The figure had moved its right arm. It then moved its right leg. The movements were slow and unnatural, like the movements of a character from an old-fashioned stop-action film. My heart began racing. I moved slowly, trying to make sure this thing couldn't detect my presence. As I drove, it continued its slow march in my direction. When I was out of view and safely in the staircase, I dashed up the stairs. I needed to get my wife and my kids in the car so we could get the hell away from whatever that thing was. Screw our bags. I could come back and collect our items when I had the National Guard and a bloody priest to ward off whatever the hell that was. I entered the kids' bedroom to see that Michael had woken up, but Kate was still asleep. "Michael," I said, "I need you to wake your sister up and get dressed. I'll be back in a minute to get you two out the door." He hopped out of bed. I tried to remain as calm as possible, but I could tell he knew something was wrong. He looked at me wide-eyed. "I will explain when we get to the car, but we need to go now." He nodded, but his bottom lip quivered. I dashed back into my bedroom to wake Mary. "Mary," I said. I tapped her on the shoulder, and she opened her eyes, annoyed. "What time is it?" She spoke as if she were still a teenager having to be woken up to go to school. "We need to go now." I grabbed my phone, wallet, and keys from the bedstand. "What's wrong?" She sat up in bed when she detected the urgency in my voice. "There is something in the yard," I said. "What is in the yard?" Her eyes opened wide and she grabbed my arm. I have no fucking clue. We just need to go. I tried to escape her grasp, but she kept her grip tight around me. What is in the yard? Each syllable she spoke was deliberate. Okay, just go look for yourself. I led her to the hall window, and we gazed down into the yard below. The thing was still there, lurking. Its pace had quickened, and it was coming right in our direction. Mary stood there for a moment, contemplating if she was dreaming or not. I watched her face turn from shock to confusion until it finally rested on pure terror. "Daddy," said Michael. He snuck up behind us, startling the both of us. "I'm all dressed." "Okay," I said. Mary and I looked at each other. Her jaw was clenched, and I noticed that she was shaking. Without saying a word, I grabbed Michael and held him tight in my arms. Kate waddled out from the bedroom, and Mary snatched her up. I led the way, carrying Michael down the stairs slowly. He was silent, but his grip around my shoulders was almost suffocating. "Mommy, I'm scared," said Kate. She too could detect the tension in the air. Mary shushed her, saying, "It's okay. We just need to be really quiet right now." "But I'm scared." "Quiet," I snapped at her. Tears welled in her eyes. Mary then nestled Kate close to her body, so the sobbing was muffled. We walked into the sunroom to find that the creature was far closer than before. It had now found a steady pace. It was approaching at a moderate speed, but still too fast for my comfort. "Mary," I said, "I am going to run out and start the car. I will drive as fast as I can to the door. You get the kids and throw them in the back and hop in." She nodded slowly, not letting her gaze leave the approaching creature. I dropped Michael on the ground and had him stand next to Mary. "Keep your eyes closed," I said. Michael shut his eyes tight and nodded. Kate continued to cry, and I saw a tear fall from Michael's eye. I opened the front door, looked down the hill. The car was about 50 feet away from me. With my keys in hand, I started my run to the car. It was then the creature stopped. It stood there for a moment as I ran at full speed. It then rose onto its hind legs and stood tall like a human. It reached its arms out behind it and arched backward. Suddenly, I felt a vibration so intense that I fell to the ground. I heard something faintly, but it was too deep, and my eardrums could barely make it out. It sounded metallic, like a brass instrument being listened to by somebody underwater. I rose to my feet and kept running. For a moment, everything became a blur, but I suddenly found myself behind the wheel. I opened the automatic doors of the minivan and drove. I noticed that the creature was no longer standing on its hind legs, but was crouched like an Olympic runner, preparing for a sprint. I gulped. Mary was waiting with the kids outside as I pulled up to the cabin. She threw them in the back without buckling them in and then jumped in the front. "What are you waiting for? Go." She held onto the armrest as I reversed the car and turned around. As we turned around to face it, it confronted us head-on. I stepped on the gas, and it charged at us. We drove down the old rural driveway as fast as we could. The creature, at full speed, ran like a horse would in slow motion. It almost floated as it ran, giving the impression that it was light as a cloud. Mary let out a scream as Kate continued to bawl in the back seat. I kept my eyes on the road, knowing it would do no good for me to continue to watch as we were stalked by the creature. My family's screaming continued, then turned to a sob, then silence. We had made it to the main road when I finally dared to look in the rearview window. "It's gone," I said. Nobody responded. Everyone's eyes were red. We drove to a nearby diner on the main road, feeling relieved to finally have human contact other than ourselves. We ate in silence and barely spoke until we arrived home. When I got home, I called the property manager to explain why we had not packed up our things. I couldn't explain what that thing was if I tried. What we witnessed was so out of the ordinary that I had to invent a tale. "A strange man was standing in the yard," I said. "It looked like he was stalking the house. We had no phone service, so we all got in the car and drove as fast as possible." The property manager understood, but explained that we could have called the police on the in-house landline. I said we were too terrified to think of that. The property manager told me he could contact the police to survey the area. We arranged to meet at the property the following day to collect my things before the next guests arrived. I have to admit, I was a bit afraid to return to the property, but was assured when both the property manager and two police cars were on the scene. I told them a strange man was standing right where the creature stood. They looked around but couldn't find anyone. They told the property manager to warn the future guests about any strange characters around. I made up some generic description, but essentially said the man was too far away to make out any discernible features. I collected my family's things and then left. As I left the property, I glanced in the woods adjacent to the field and swore that I saw a figure, doing nothing but standing there, lurking. My family has not spoken of the incident since, and I am too afraid to share it with others because of its implausibility. That is why I must get it out there anonymously, for keeping it to myself is eating me up inside. I now don't drink liquids near bedtime, because I'm too afraid to get up and go to the bathroom early in the morning. I went on a scuba diving vacation with my two friends. We encountered something terrifying. Is everyone ready to enter the water? I looked up from the final checks of my gear at the voice emanating from the stern of the tour boat. The midday sun, high in the sky, blinded me for a moment, and raising my hand to shield it, I focused on who it had come from. A tall, well-built man with a crew cut, sporting an almost permanent tan, shot me a pleasant smile. "You all ready over there, Billy?" he called. In response, I took a last look at my gauge readout, seeing they were all in the green, then shot the man a thumbs up. "All ready, Ren." He nodded, then turned to help a couple near to him who seemed to be having some difficulty in attaching their weight belts and vests. "Freaking newbies," came a voice next to me, and I turned to see my friend Lonnie shooting an annoyed stare at the two our dive leader was helping. "Hey, give him a break, man," I said to him. "Remember, we were all once newbies ourselves. Just be happy others are still taking an interest in diving in the first place." In response, he sighed, running his fingers through his short, brown hair. "Yeah, don't act like you were never in his shoes in the first place," called Vicky, my other friend. She leaned around me to shoot an exasperated look at the youngest member of our trio, narrowing her green eyes at him. Lonnie raised his hands in surrender. Okay, sheesh. I was just saying it can sometimes be a headache to deal with, even if we were once like them." Vicky shook her head at his response, then pulled back to adjust her mask on her face. "Hey, no arguing here, guys," I said. "We're on vacation here, remember?" For a second, they both looked at me, then nodded slowly. As they finished their checks, I let out a small sigh. Why, oh why, was I cursed with being the most mature of us three? I shook my head. The time for thinking that was over, and I should be enjoying myself. The three of us had decided to take a summer vacation on our college break to the beautiful areas of Papua New Guinea and Australia, as a way to unwind before classes started back up in fall. It had taken a few years to pool together the money needed for the trip, but, as we'd begun saving up together since freshman year, by our junior year, we had amassed enough to go. And now, we were here, resting on the back of a dive boat some 10 or 15 miles off the coast, ready to dive on some of the beautiful coral reefs of the area. Today was the second to last day of our 2-week trip, and at Vicky's behest, we'd planned a final diving trip before catching our flight home. My thoughts were shaken away as I heard Ren call again. "Okay, folks, remember what we discussed on our voyage out here. You may separate into small groups, no smaller than 3 to a group though, and make your way along the reef. But please, I have to stress this, under absolutely no circumstances are you to venture too far from the boat. For those who'd like a guided tour, I will be forming a group with some of our less experienced members. And with that said, be safe and have fun." I raised my mask as the final words left his lips and centered it on my face, tightening the straps to make sure no water could leak in. Picking up the regulator, I turned so my tank was facing Vicky. "Could you turn me on, please?" I asked. Instantly, she began to giggle, and I groaned. "I didn't mean that way. Get your head out of the gutter, Vic." Still giggling, she elbowed me in the ribs. "You know I hate being called that," she said in a mock warning. "Yeah, I know," I replied, shooting her a grin. Shaking her head, she turned the safety valve, allowing air to flow into the regulator. Testing it quickly, I pulled it out. "Well, you guys ready?" They both nodded eagerly. "I'm making sure to get a metric fuck-ton of pictures this time," Lonnie exclaimed. He'd promised to grab some good photographs for Nicole, his shutterbug girlfriend who was waiting back home for him. I smiled as I turned both of their safety valves, the last thing needed before leaving the boat. "Then let's get down there while the going's good." Smiling, they both put their own regulators into their mouths, and after a moment, flipped backwards into the ocean with a splash. All around me, the others in our group were doing the same. I saw Ren flip overboard, the flash of his neon yellow flippers catching the rays of the sun. And then, I was left as the only one still aboard the boat, aside from the pilot who had ducked below for something. I quickly shot a last look around. The water had become perfectly calm again, except for the small whitecaps. If I didn't know any better, I'd say the others had never even been here, I thought. The air almost seemed to take on a slightly eerie feeling to it, and then it was gone, washed away like a piece of seaweed on the shore. "Get your ass in the water, man. The others are waiting for you." And with that last thought, I placed a hand over my mask to protect it and rolled backwards into the deep blue. A flurry of bubbles passed in front of my vision for a second, and I took a moment to let my sense of balance catch up with me. Soon, though, everything became clear, the weightless feeling providing me a sense of calm. I'd scuba dived ever since I'd been 17, and after 8 years of experience, I now felt almost more comfortable beneath the waves than on land. Glancing around, I saw the others had already formed their own groups. The teams of 2 or 3, or in the case of Ren's group, 4 or 5 were already swimming away from under the shadow the boat cast onto the bright white sandy seafloor, towards the reefs almost surrounding us. I quickly spotted Vicky and Lonnie waiting for me near the bottom, and after a few kicks downward I joined them, flashing them an OK sign. They flashed one of their own, and as a group, we swam towards the reef. As we approached, we saw a beautiful world rise up in front of us. Coral of countless colors spread out beneath us, stretching away into the distance like we were jetliners flying over a city. Brightly colored fish swam about and in the coral, going about their daily business, each with varying degrees of hurry. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the long, slim green body of a moray eel slide in between the formations in search of its next meal. For about 15 or 20 minutes we stayed in the area, each taking plenty of photographs and video, the only sound heard being the exhalation of our bubbles rising back towards the surface. Then Lonnie pointed a little further away from us, towards where the reef dropped deeper into the water. The section of reef we were visiting rested on a shelf, dropping a few thousand feet down over the edge. I nodded, making a mental note to keep an eye to make sure we didn't wander too far away. As we moved into the deeper water, the animals changed. Fish became bigger, with a particularly curious triggerfish coming a little too close to comfort, causing me to shoo it away. Those things have a nasty bite I'd rather not experience personally. I kept my eyes out for the darkened form of any sharks or barracudas. Both loved swimming over the reefs in search of sick or injured fish to pick off, and though attacks weren't exactly common, it's still wise to keep your eyes peeled. Vicky lowered down close to the coral to snap a picture of a small group of red and black sea urchins, and I drank in the view for a moment, simply allowing myself to bask in the present. This has been such an amazing and wonderful trip. I'm seriously going to miss it when we go back home to the drabness of Washington. I let out a bit of a sigh, causing a rather large stream of bubbles to rise to the surface. Now wasn't the time for dwelling on what was to come. Now was for enjoying what I could, while I could. I joined Vicky and snapped off the photos of the sea urchins, then looked around for Lonnie. For a moment I didn't see him, and a small wave of trepidation coursed through me, until I finally spotted him about 30 feet away. He looked to be very interested in something, and focused as well. Might as well go see what he's looking at, I thought, and tapped Vicky on the shoulder before pointing. She nodded, and together we swam over to our friend. As we drew closer, however, The focus of Lonnie's attention grew a bit clearer. I froze, hovering in the water. Oh, oh boy. After a moment, I gently waved at Lonnie to get his attention, but it seemed he was too focused on the view through his camera lens to see it. I made a grunting sound around my regulator, but again, it seemed he didn't notice or care. I heard the sound of his camera's shutter snapping a few times. Then he lowered it. For a moment, I thought he would swim away, but to my shock, and similarly, to my horror, he slowly began swimming down towards it. Lonnie, no! Don't be a fucking idiot! I wanted to scream it out loud, but couldn't, due to the water and the regulator in my mouth. I wanted to rush towards him, but I knew it might cause even more of a dangerous situation than it already was to begin with. So I motioned for Vicky to stay put, then swam slowly, but deliberately towards the dumb ass that was my friend. As he began to reach out with one hand, I reached him, grabbing him firmly by the wrist. Instantly, he shot a look up at me. Oh, now I have your attention? I shot him a look through my mask, then shook my head pointedly. He shrugged his shoulders, then looked back down. I tightened my grip, making him look back at me. Shaking my head again, I pointed for the surface. After a moment, he shook himself out of my grasp, then swam for the surface, Vicky following after him. Allowing myself to calm down a little, I gazed down at what I'd stopped Lonnie from being a supreme idiot and attempting to touch. The pulsating, almost neon blue-looking rings shone clearly up at me from the creature's perch in a patch of coral. Small, black, beady eyes gazed warily up at me, and the yellowish body stood out in the green background. A blue-ringed octopus, one of the most venomous species of animal in the world. Although it was small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, it had enough venom in it to kill multiple full-grown men with one bite of its beak. And that dingbat just tried touching it? Yeah, real brilliant, dude. Shaking my head and feeling my annoyance give way to a small flash of anger, I kicked for the surface myself, making sure not to disturb the small animal. "What the hell is your problem, man?" were the first words I heard as my head broke the surface. I spat the regulator out of my mouth. "My problem? Dude, are you a fucking dumbass, or do you have a death wish to try and touch a friggin' blue-ringed octopus?" I saw Vicky's face go slightly pale. She hadn't realized what he'd been about to poke. "Lon, are you fucking nuts?" she exclaimed. Lonnie's face grew dark and I could tell he was getting irritated, but I frankly didn't care. The man was more of a daredevil than I was, which was saying something, considering I once jumped off the roof of a 3-story apartment into a pool for fun. But this time, like many before, his fearlessness had crossed the line from bravery into stupidity. "I was only going to brush it, it's not like I was going to annoy it or anything," he grumbled. I stifled a harsh laugh. "Dude, it was flashing the rings of blue, which means you already annoyed it. If you touched it, it would have absolutely bit you." I narrowed my eyes at him. "And I don't know if you remember this particular little detail, but there is no antidote or antivenom for it." Lonnie let out a disgusted sigh. "You're a good friend, Billy, but sometimes you drag me down with your safety, especially following the rules." For a moment, I felt my temper flare up, almost to the point I wanted to punch the guy straight in the schnoz, but thankfully, Vicky came to my rescue, seeing me uncharacteristically angry. "Hey, come on. Let's not fight, okay? We've got—" She checked her dive watch. 40 minutes left before the dive leader calls us back to the boat, so let's not waste this." She turned to Lonnie. "You need to realize Billy might have just saved your ass, so you don't have to thank him, but let's at least move away somewhere else, okay?" Lonnie didn't answer her, but nodded his head. She let out a sigh of relief. Now, I saw an open patch of sandy bottom in a section of even deeper water, close to the drop-off. I thought I saw a few rays swimming over it, so let's go check that out for our final exploration, okay? I nodded. Okay. Lonnie again said nothing, but nodded as well. Each of us put our regulators back into our mouths, then slipped back below the waves. It took us about 25 to 27 minutes to swim to the section Vicky had mentioned. I hadn't realized it was so far from the boat, and Ren's words of caution flashed through my mind. I glanced back and could still just see the underside of the boat bobbing up and down in the clear water. Well, we're still close enough to know when it's time to leave. The thought brought me some comfort and I turned back to survey the area we'd arrived at. It was almost strange. The clear, sandy area formed an almost perfect circle of about 60 or 70 feet across. Looking out, I saw a few more a little further along the reef, but they only seemed to start around here, where the depth, according to my gauge, was about 65 feet. For a moment, I stayed where I was. An odd feeling had just come over me, one I'd never had before. I couldn't exactly place what it was, but I was certainly not fond of the tightening sensation in my gut. I glanced around, looking to see if it was an instinctive reaction from a predator in the area, but I saw nothing. Huh. Must just be because of the fight, I guess. Trying to shake it away, I swam down to join my friends at the bottom. As I approached, Lonnie quickly swam away from me. A small flicker of annoyance came back into me, then faded just as quickly. Just let him be, he'll get over it sooner or later. I turned to Vicky, who gestured around with a look of wonder etched on her face through the mask. My curiosity over the circle returned the forefront of my mind, and together, we began to explore the sandy circle. I was halfway through with a second swim over when something caught my attention. I swam closer to the seafloor, trying to distinguish it from the trillions of grains of sand. There, is that a shark tooth? It certainly looked like it, standing out enough with its whiter hue than the surrounding area. I reached down and gently ran my index finger over it. The hard feeling combined with the serrated edge confirmed it. A thought flashed through my mind. I've always wanted a shark tooth necklace. Maybe I could make one out of this. It would be the perfect memento to remember the trip. Careful not to cut myself on the edges, I attempted to lift it up, but it seemed to be stuck in the sand. I pulled a little harder, but still no luck. Mentally sighing, I reached into a small pack around my waist and pulled a pair of diving gloves from them. I'd need to get them hold on tighter without cutting myself. Slipping them on, I again sank down to the floor and gripped the tooth. After a few seconds fighting, it seemed to start to give, but it didn't come up. I don't care how long it takes, I'm not leaving without you. I pulled harder and finally felt it begin to lift. But something felt odd. It felt like something was connected to the tooth still. I yanked one final time, a small cloud of sand flying up and blurring my vision. After a moment, it cleared, and I looked down at the relatively heavy object in my hand. Verheim, A day Excruel, lowered, and let out a muffled shout of surprise around my regulator, dropping it quickly. It floated lazily back down to the sand, where it kicked up a much smaller cloud to mark its return. I remained where I was, staring at it and attempting to comprehend exactly what I was looking at. Many teeth stared back at me, along with a black, lifeless eye which looked like a doll's eye. I was staring at the head of a rather large tiger shark. Just the head. Not far ahead of where the pectoral fins should be was an almost surgically neat slice which marked where the decapitation had occurred. I kept staring at it, my heartbeat slowing, but the uneasy feeling from the nasty surprise remaining. Well, never thought I'd find that, I thought. A second later, I began to wonder what had happened to it. It couldn't have been a boat or fisherman. The wound was far too neat and clean. But what in the hell lives on a reef which preys on a damn tiger shark? The thought made the uneasy feeling rise slightly. That was when I noticed something else. When we'd first arrived at the area, I'd thought the sandy bottom was perfectly flat. But it wasn't. It was almost in a depression. The outer edges of the circle the highest, with the center dipped down, as if there were an open space which had been filled with the sand. For some reason, a shiver flashed up my spine at the thought. Something rumbled in the back of my brain, a piece of knowledge I had learned many years ago, but I couldn't place it. Not being able to recollect it quickly was causing the uneasy feeling to grow and well inside me. I flashed another look around, seeing Vicky attempting to catch up with Lonnie, who had already begun moving towards the next circular sandy area. That was when something I'd only slightly noticed before fully clicked into place in my mind. When the feeling had first come over me, I'd looked around to see if any sharks, barracudas, or other large fish were nearby. I hadn't seen any, but that hadn't been the only thing I hadn't seen. The fish? Where did all the fish go? Even in the deeper sections of the reef, there should have been life everywhere. But I saw not a sign of life. I could see the flashes of them farther away, about 200 or 300 feet back. But past a certain point, there were no fish out here. Almost as if they know to avoid this area.
Another shiver rolled up my spine at the thought, and I decided then and there that it was time for us to head back to the boat. I kicked hard towards the other two, and in a few seconds reached them. I tapped both on the shoulders, and they turned to regard me, Lonnie still harboring a look of irritation and anger in his eyes. I gestured back towards the direction of the boat, then pointed to my dive watch. After a moment, Vicky understood and nodded. However, Lonnie shook his head at me, and instead pointed to the largest circular clear area of sand I'd seen yet. I took one look and shook my head fiercely. It was far too close to the drop-off, in what had to be 80 or 90 feet of water. No, no way in hell, even if I wasn't having this feeling. Even more hell no, because I am. I pointed again at my watch, then stabbed back towards the boat. I saw Lonnie's eyes flash with anger, and in response he flipped me the bird before kicking hard away from us, towards the circle. I let out a muffled growl of anger, then felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. Turning, I saw Vicky motioning for me to calm myself. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them and nodded at her. I was not normally this easily agitated, but the prior argument, coupled with the uneasy feeling which now felt more ominous, was setting me easily on edge. I pointed towards Lonnie, then back towards the boat to more or less say, "Let's go get him and head back." She nodded. Then together, we swam after our friend. He had already reached the circle and was beginning across it. As we descended, the water began to feel a little chillier as the sun's warmth couldn't reach this far down. Closing to within about 20 feet of the edge, the ominous feeling I'd been harboring in my gut suddenly crescendoed, and every instinctive feeling in me told me to turn around. I didn't hesitate, spinning around to confront. Nothing. There was nothing there. I looked around, my head rotating on a swivel to try and locate whatever had set me off. But nothing presented itself out of the darker blue gloom. I felt a hand touch my side and turned to see Vicky staring at me. She shrugged her shoulders, raising her hands as if to ask, "What's the matter?" Unable to answer her, I simply shook my head, then pointed out, back towards the way we'd come. A sudden, unexpected surge of water behind us caused us both to be pushed forward, the rapid change making me feel a bit disoriented. What the hell was that? I wondered, and looked at Vicky. She too was looking around, and turned to me, shrugging again. Shaking my head and feeling even more uneasy, I turned back around. For a moment I couldn't comprehend what my eyes were telling me, and I felt a sense of disbelief wash over me. What the fuck? Lonnie was gone. There was no sign he'd ever even been there. And save for a rather large, settling cloud of sand drifting down towards the seafloor, there was no sign of disturbance either. I looked around, feeling the confusion give way to a mixture of shock and concern. Where the actual fuck did he go? He had been close to the center of the circle, too far in to have swum out of without us seeing where he'd gone. My gaze drifted to the edge of the drop-off, looking down into where the water changed from blue to almost black as it fell away into nothingness. I shook my head. He's not that suicidally dumb. But the process of elimination hadn't helped me one bit. If anything, it was causing a new feeling to well up inside of me. A mixture of two emotions, fear and dread. Vicky locked eyes with me, and I could see the same look of concern and fear emblazoned in her eyes. She gestured wildly to the empty area in front of us, then waved around as if to show the obvious. After a moment, I shook my head. Even I'd been able to speak, I had no answer to give her. She hesitated for a moment, then kicked hard for the circle. After a moment's hesitation myself, I began to kick after her. By the time I reached the edge of the circle, she was about a third of the way across. I stopped at the edge, hovering just above the coral formations, and let my gaze sweep across the sandy bottom. Just like the other circles we'd passed, this one too looked to be formed into a bit of a depression. Or in this case, 2 or 3 depressions, for a circle with a circumference of about 2 of 300 feet across. I kept scanning the bottom from side to side. Just like the other circles as well, there was no sign of life in it. Well, not entirely none. Unlike the other circles, I saw this one actually had something in it. At odd intervals across the circle, I saw what looked to be a strange object poking almost straight out upwards. They rose about half a foot off the bottom, swaying gently in the current rolling in from the open ocean, similar to how seagrass would. But there was no seagrass in this area. I saw Vicky reach the other edge of the circle, and not finding anything, turn and begin swimming quickly back to me. My eyes were drawn back to the swaying protrusions, and for some reason, I couldn't tell you why. Every single alarm bell began to go off in my head looking at them. The feeling of fear and dread, which had dipped slightly as I'd studied the circle, suddenly rolled over me like a tsunami. Vicky had reached almost the center of the circle now, and I saw her raise her hands in a shrug at me again, pointing back towards the boat to say we should head there. I quickly waved for her to join me, wanting her to get out of the circle as fast as she could. A thought had begun to swim its way forward in my brain, along with a memory from years ago, one which I shook away. That was impossible. In response, she held up a finger and stopped for a moment, likely to rest after swimming so hard. What happened next happened in the blink of an eye. 1 second, all was calm as she hovered about a foot off the bottom. The next, the sandy seafloor almost seemed to explode upwards, as if someone had buried a live grenade in the bottom and pulled the pin. A huge surge of water, this one far more powerful than the first, had been slammed into me, and I was pushed back, going ass over tea kettle in a sort of underwater pirouette. I quickly uprighted myself and turned back towards the circle, and I let out a muffled scream, seawater flowing in around my regulator as I felt all the blood drain from my face. I only caught a split-second glimpse of it, but that microsecond was far too long. I saw the long, cylindrical body rising up out of the sand, broken up into many segments with a ribbon of blue and green running down the middle, as if someone had painted a line down its stomach. I saw numerous legs wiggling in the water as it rose almost 4 or 5 feet off the bottom. I saw the protrusions rising above all of it. No, not protrusions. Feelers. And I saw the 4 huge, razor-sharp mandibles, which had snapped shut around— oh God, no. Vicky had been snared in their grasp. I could see they had snapped shut around her midsection, and blood had begun pouring out into the water. My eyes locked with hers, which had gone wide behind her mask. For a moment, she seemed to reach out towards me. And then it and she were gone, yanked back below the sand faster than I could comprehend. I breathed rapidly, knowing it wasn't good for my air supply, but not caring. My mind was racing to catch up with what I'd just seen, and I began to shake uncontrollably. I didn't just see that. That's fucking impossible. What the fuck? But no, I could see it clearly now. I could see the feelers, at least 3 pairs of them, poking out from the sandy bottom. I could see the faint outline of the mandibles, poised open towards the surface just beneath the sand. The edges curved wickedly, and I felt another shudder pass through me as I stared at them. They were waiting for something, or someone careless enough to swim over them. Then I felt the biggest surge of dread and horror course through me as the sand began to move, parted as the unseen creatures began to rise from their ambush spot. They knew the jig was up. Their hiding spot had been blown. I watched in horror as the huge half-worm, half-centipede like creatures emerged from their hidey holes. Each had to be at least 30 to 40 feet in length. I've never been someone who's been afraid of insects or creepy crawlers, as my grandfather used to say. But these things made me cower as if I were a child being confronted by the boogeyman hiding in the closet. They each swam away towards another circle about 30 feet away. In moments, they had reburied themselves, and the water cleared. It was as if nothing had happened. That was when the fear in me climaxed. Not all of them had moved on. One was still there. It had fully pulled itself from its hole and lay draped across the sand. The head, one I could see, had no eyes, raised off the bottom, and it slowly began to move forward towards me. I realized how much of an easy target I had made myself. In an instant, I turned and kicked as hard as I could away, back towards the boat. I felt a surge of water pass by not far behind me, and I heard the sickening sound of something snapping closed on empty water. I knew what it had been, and the mental image spurred me to swim faster. I felt my leg muscles begin to burn, but I refused to stop. I screamed around my regulator again, the mental image of my friend vanishing into the seafloor, being replaced with one of myself, my hand extending towards the surface as I was dragged under it to be consumed. I didn't dare look back, didn't want to see if it was still giving chase. I just kept swimming. The minutes ticked by in my head, but even when I reached the shallow area of the reef, the fish reappearing in abundance, I refused to slow. Rounding a coral formation, I crashed headlong into something. My mind, fried from the adrenaline and fear swimming in my veins in equal copious amounts, didn't register what it was at first. I felt something grab me, and I began to lash out, kicking and punching in every direction. It got ahead of me. It got ahead of me, and now I'm dead. I heard the sound of a grunt. A human grunt. Focusing, I realized I'd swam headlong into one of the other divers. To be specific, I'd swum into Ren. I calmed for a moment, then pushed out of his grasp and kicked for the surface. I broke into the afternoon air, yanking the regulator from my mouth and wrenching the mask off my face. I treaded water and began to sob. When Ren surfaced beside me, the only thing I could tell him was that my friends were gone. I could barely say anything more beyond the area near the drop-off, as I couldn't stop crying and shaking. The image of Vicky being snatched and dragged below the sand kept replaying over and over in my head, and it took center stage of my focus. I was barely aware of being pulled towards and aboard the dive boat, or of Ren radioing in the emergency. However, when I heard him mention going back into the water to search for them, I shot upwards, barely managing to make out a single sentence. Stay out of the circles. Don't go in the circles. That was a week and a half ago. I'm still in Papua New Guinea, as there is an inquiry going on right now. I was taken to the hospital, where it was deemed I had gone into a shock from the traumatic experience I'd been through. I did manage to make out my story to the doctors and police, though. I knew I'd sound insane, but there was no way I could not tell them the truth. They needed to know. They didn't believe me, of course. The story they decided on after hearing my story, and disregarding it, was that Lonnie and Vicky had made a sort of suicide pact, swimming down over the edge of the drop-off to drown. They made it, because as it turned out, and to my shock, both Lonnie and Vicky had been on antidepressants. They found the bottles in their bags when their belongings had been brought to the police station. Neither one of them had told me they struggled with their mental health. It's easy to understand why my insane story about giant insect-like creatures would be disregarded as the ravings of someone who saw two people close to him kill themselves. It's a neat fit. But I know the truth. Both Lonnie and Vicky's parents are flying out here right now. The police told me, along with mine, are on the next flight from the States here. I honestly don't know what I'll say to them, any of them when they get here. Every night I've gone back to my hotel room. I've raided the minibar, drinking, to try and expel the memories from my conscious brain. But not even the alcohol is enough to chase away the nightmares. Nightmares of being back underwater and seeing in crystal clear detail the nightmarish creature pulling my friend down to her death, and the red blood which began to seep up through the sand before they appeared. I wake up screaming, at the image of that one which came after me. I've been doing a lot of research on my laptop, since I'm more or less confined to my hotel room until my parents get here. The thought I had before that hell erupted from the sea floor never left my mind, and I remembered what I'd seen years ago in the Seattle Aquarium. And as much as I didn't want to find out if I was right, I typed 2 words into the search bar with slightly shaking fingers. Bobbit worm. When the image results came up, I began to shake uncontrollably before slamming the screen shut. I will never go back into the ocean again. Not after seeing what I have. Not after knowing what lies, not only beneath the waves but below the seafloor itself. I highly doubt I'd be able to convince anyone else to believe me. But I'm writing this and posting this here as a warning. If you ever go scuba diving, especially down in this part of the world, and you ever come across a large, circular sandy area surrounded by coral reef with seemingly nothing in it, please, for the love of God, take my advice. Stay away from it.
My wife and I bought a vacation home. Now, I wish we wouldn't have. Do you ever watch those shows on HDTV about people purchasing homes on the lake or the ocean? My wife and I watch them all the time. Lakefront bargain hunt, beachfront bargain hunt, Caribbean life, island life, etc. We have always wanted a waterfront vacation home. A place for us to get away on vacations and weekends, to give us a break from our busy lives during the week, and to enjoy each other's company. We both have good-paying jobs and no kids, so it has always been an attainable goal of ours that we have been working towards for a while now. About a month ago, we made this dream a reality. We purchased a private lakefront home on Lake Winnebago in Wisconsin. It has everything we wanted. We have a nice view of the lake, a private beach area, a boat dock, surrounded by woods, not a neighbor around for miles, and only about a 2-hour drive from our home. It was the perfect place for us to get away, or so we thought. We purchased the home back in February, but hadn't been able to spend a lot of time there due to our busy schedules and the freezing cold weather in Wisconsin. I have been working on getting it ready for the summer as often as I could. 2 weekends ago, I took a Friday off work to try and get some work done and move some stuff in. The plan was for my wife to meet me there Friday night, but she had an emergency at work and was stuck working late. I was going to head home, but changed my mind and decided to stay the night. I had already drank a few beers and didn't really feel like driving. I was also eager to relax in the hot tub that was just recently put in. I called my wife and let her know that I was going to spend the night, and she agreed to meet me here Saturday morning. It was around 9:30 p.m., as I was relaxing in the whirlpool drinking my beer, when I heard a knock on the door. At first I was excited, thinking my wife decided to come up after all. I got out of the whirlpool, went downstairs and opened the door. There was no one there. At this point, I was probably 5 or 6 beers deep and convinced myself I was hearing things. I closed the door and made sure it was locked. I didn't feel like getting back in the tub, so I dried myself off, got dressed, and went into the living room. We didn't have cable, but I had bought an Xbox One to use at this house. We didn't have internet at the house yet, so I brought some Blu-rays to watch. If I knew my wife wasn't going to make it, I would have packed some games also. I decided to start season 1 of Lost. I hadn't watched it forever and figured it would keep me entertained until I fell asleep. 20 minutes into the first episode, I hear another knock at my door. What in the hell? I think to myself. I was starting to get aggravated. My wife and I chose this house because we thought it would be private. I got up and looked out the window. At first I didn't see anything, then in the distance I thought I saw something moving in the woods. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out onto my deck. I shined the flashlight into the woods. There was a little girl standing in the woods. It was hard to tell from so far away, but I would guess she was between 5 to 8 years old. I thought this was very odd, because like I said, we didn't really have any neighbors close by. I was worried about her being out in the woods by herself this late, so I decided to walk out there and see if she needed help. I walked down the stairs into the yard and shined the light back in the direction of where the girl was. She was gone. I found this very strange, as I never heard her run off. I walked closer to the woods and shined my light all over. There was no trace of this girl. I was starting to get weirded out by the whole situation. I turned around and hurried back inside, making sure I locked the door behind me. I decided I should call the police and let them know about the girl I saw. I walked into the living room and noticed an envelope on the coffee table. I picked it up and looked inside. It was filled with pictures. I took the pictures out and got chills. There were pictures of me, taken earlier that day, I assume. There were pictures of the house, but the one that shocked me the most was the very last picture. It was a picture of me, probably 8 or 9 years ago, holding a newborn baby. I remembered this picture. At the time, I thought that the baby I was holding was my daughter. Her name was Abby. I found out about 2 months later, from my then-girlfriend at the time, that it was not mine. I flipped out. I left her and the baby. It tore me up at the time. I never thought I wanted kids. But I loved Abby. Even after I was told she wasn't mine, I still loved her. But I wouldn't raise a child that wasn't mine. I hadn't seen this picture in years. How did it show up here? Where did all of these pictures come from? They weren't on my coffee table a few minutes ago when I walked outside. Somebody had to sneak in here while I was outside. Chills ran down my spine just thinking about it. I picked up the phone to call the police, but of course I had no signal. I wanted to go home. I wanted to get as far away from this house as possible. But I was still too buzzed to drive. If I got pulled over, I would definitely blow over the limit and get a DWI. It just wasn't worth it. I laid back down on the couch and tried to calm myself down. If I could just make it through the night, my wife would be here in the morning and everything would be fine. My heart was beating and I couldn't stop thinking about the pictures. I was creeped out by the whole situation. I tried focusing on the TV when I heard footsteps upstairs, followed by a loud thud. I could hear the footsteps walking toward the stairs. I jumped up and ran into the downstairs bathroom and shut the door. My heart was pounding so fucking fast, I thought it was going to explode. I didn't know what to do. I heard the footsteps coming down the stairs, plain as day. I was not imagining this. They were there. Then I heard a voice. It sounded like a little girl. I put my ear to the door so I could hear better. "Daddy? Daddy? Where are you?" What in the fuck? I thought. I was so confused yet so terrified. Was this the girl I saw in the woods? How the fuck did she get in my house? I heard her voice again. "It's not nice to hide from your daughter, Daddy," she said. I felt like crying. I don't know why I was so terrified of a little girl, but something wasn't right. I started thinking about how to get the hell out of here. There was no window in this bathroom, so I had to go out the house somehow. My brain was working frantically trying to think of an escape plan, when all of the sudden there was a knock on the bathroom door. I froze, trying not to make a sound. She knocked again, this time harder. She then let out a loud scream that made the hair on the back of my head stand up. "You can't hide from us, Matthew." This time it was a grown woman's voice. I slid down against the wall and didn't move, praying whoever they were would leave. My heart was still pounding. I was exhausted. Next thing I knew, I was hearing another voice, a more familiar one this time. "Matt? Where are you?" It was my wife. I jumped up and rushed out the door. It was light out. I must have fell asleep in the bathroom. My wife came around the corner with a confused expression on her face. "Where the hell have you been? I have been trying to reach you all night." I sat her down and explained everything that happened. I told her I would not come back here and wanted to put the house back on the market. She of course thought I was nuts. She went upstairs to take a nap, as she had not slept at all the night before. I told her I would be up in a minute. I started going through the pictures again. I found the picture of me holding Abby. I noticed there was something written on the back. It said, "I will see you soon. Love, Abby." I was now even more confused. How would Abby even know about me? I hadn't seen her since she was roughly 2 months old, when her mom told me she wasn't my daughter. I decided to try and contact her mom. I didn't have her number anymore, so I had to look her up on Facebook. I found her right away. I sent her a message giving her my number and asking her to call me right away. About 10 minutes later, my phone rings. "Hello? Matt? It's Ashley. I just got your message on Facebook. What's up?" "Hi, Ashley. Something kinda odd happened last night and I wanted to talk to you about it." I explained what happened last night as Ashley listened in silence. When I got to the part about the picture of me holding Abby and the note on the back of the picture from Abby, Ashley started crying. "Is this some kind of joke, Matt?" Ashley asked frantically. I was confused. "Ashley, what's wrong? I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not saying it was Abby, but something is very strange about the whole situation. Where do you guys live anyway? Is it possible she was here last night?" I asked. "No, Matt. It's not possible. Abby died over a year ago. My fiancé gets back from vacation today, and I couldn't be more afraid. So, a few days ago, my fiancé went on a cruise with some of her friends from high school. They've been planning this for years, and she has been saving up money from her job to be able to afford it for quite some time now. She left a few days before the cruise to get on a plane for the Florida Keys, and I've had the apartment to myself since then. We live in a 1-bedroom and 1.5-bathroom apartment, so it's nothing very special, but it's home. Since she left, however, I've been experiencing things. Really terrifying, shitty things. At first, I tried to shrug it all off, but it's built too much. I can't just mentally write it off anymore. I need to talk about it, because I think something awful is happening to me, and it's not just coincidences. It's something evil. The first thing that happened was the recurring nightmare. It happened the night before she got on the boat. It was getting late, and after calling her and talking to her for an hour before, I was exhausted. I went to sleep expecting a rather ordinary, if not quitter than usual night, but instead, I got the nightmare. It starts with me sitting on the couch, watching a news report. It took me a moment to understand what I was watching, but I quickly realized what the footage on screen was. It was a burning hulk of a ship in the ocean, devastated by a massive explosion. I watch it sink into the ocean, and then I realize that it's her ship I'm watching sink. The news report states no survivors. The first night, this is where I woke up. I turned on a light next to my bed to look at the picture of me and my fiancé to try and cool my nerves. It was a picture of when I proposed to her. It was at the same bar we met at. I got the bartender in on it and everything. He brought us 2 glasses of wine and the ring was at the bottom of hers. I got on one knee and asked her to marry me, and she said yes. I held her close, and the bartender took a picture of us smiling together to commemorate the moment. It was the happiest memory of my life. When I looked at the picture, though, she was gone. The only thing next to me was empty space. At that point, I freaked out for a moment, but I figured I must have been still dreaming, so I went back to sleep. The daytime was normal. I would never hear from my fiancée since she was in the water now and couldn't access her cellular plan, so I would spend my days watching TV or hanging out with my friends. Before I would go to bed, I would look at the picture and it would be fine. Then I would have the nightmare and wake up and look at the picture and she would be gone. After the first few nights, I started waking up not out of fear from the dream, but reflex, and I would instinctively look at the picture and see she wouldn't be there. After a week of this, I got annoyed and honestly a bit scared. I decided to break my promised silence with her and sent her an email asking how the trip was going. I had told her before she left I wouldn't contact her on the trip, so she could have fun, but I couldn't shake the bad feeling. So I lied and said I missed her more than expected and wanted to hear from her. She responded after a few hours, and she was fine. She even sent a few pictures of the cruise. At that time, my deepest fears were dismissed, and I felt foolish for worrying about her. That calm was short-lived, though. When I went to bed that night, I looked at her picture, and she was gone. Normally, she wouldn't disappear until after I went to sleep. For a few hours, I was too shaken to sleep, but I eventually fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. Then, I had the dream again, with the newscast and the sinking ship. Before I woke up this time, though, there was a knock at the door of my apartment in the dream. When I woke up and looked at her picture, something new was in it. Near one of the booths in the background of the picture stood a thin, gray figure with barred teeth and twisted limbs and piercing red eyes that looked directly into mine. I threw the picture in a panic, and I decided not to look at it again until she got back. I started avoiding sleeping as much as I could, stayed out late with my buddies, actively avoided watching the news, anything to take my mind off the dream and the picture. I had even hidden the picture away in my dresser so I wouldn't be tempted to look at it. Every night, though, the knocking at the door would get louder and louder. It would be more panicked, more violent, until I began to fear the door would fly off its hinges in the dream. Then came the worst night, Last night, the night before she would get home. Her ship had gotten to shore just fine. I had searched every source I could to make sure of it. I couldn't contact her on her cell, though, or any of her friends. I could call or text anyone else, but not them. I was terrified. I avoided sleeping that night, drank coffee, watched movies, and even took caffeine pills to stay awake. But I eventually would crash at around 5 a.m., despite my best efforts on the contrary. And the dream was different this time. This time, in the dream, the TV was off, and my apartment was dark, and I just stared forward into the blackness. It was an unearthly quiet until I heard two calm, ominous knocks on the door. I got up and walked carefully to the door in the pitch dark and dead silence, and looked through the peephole, and there was the creature, teeth chattering, red eyes staring into mine, and it said something. "I'll be home soon." I woke up screaming. I didn't sleep after that, and it wasn't until the first rays of sun came over the horizon that I got the nerve to sit up in bed. When I looked to my left, I saw it. The picture was on my nightstand again. My fiancé gets back from vacation today, and I couldn't be more afraid, because in the picture that morning, the monster was holding me, just like she in the original picture, and it was grinning from ear to ear with dirty, bloody teeth.